Okay, we're going to finish our lecture on goals for primary math. We talked about the first goal, which was, what's the first goal? Kind of has a key word. What are we doing? We're laying a solid foundation. Second goal, paving the way. Okay, so remember, you are pouring their math foundation for the rest of their school years and beyond. And then we're going to think about paving the way to expand each of the basic math skills, expanding their place value, and then paving the way to expand from whole number math into fraction math. All right, so then the third goal for primary math is to establish good habits. We want to establish good habits. You are the primary teacher. You are establishing good habits. First of all, habits that will translate to other subjects. We want to establish good habits that will translate to other subjects. In other words, we want to establish habits to make them a good student. And this is true whether we're teaching primary math or we're teaching anything in the primary classroom. We want to establish good habits, and especially we'll start with habits that translate into other areas, other subject areas, and so forth. First habit, neatness. Neatness. Okay, neatness in particular. Neatness in how they write their name, how they take care of their textbooks, and so forth. So this will translate into all subjects, not just math. Another one is completeness. So we want to teach them, we want to help them become a good student in all subjects, not just math. That would be neatness, completeness. A third one is following directions. Following directions. The next is responsibility. Teaching them to write down what they need to do for their homework assignment and then completing it. And then not only completing it, but turning it in. Full cycle. So neatness, completeness, following directions, responsibility, and then a fifth area is paying attention. So we're going to establish good habits. We want our first graders to become good students in second grade, in third grade, and on we could go with that. In neatness, completeness, following directions, responsibility, and then paying attention. They need to have the habit of when you speak, they listen. So many students do not listen. Whether it's they completely ignore what you've told them to do. Even in such areas, and math is useful for helping establish good habits as students, because a lot of times in math class you're playing a game. You're playing a game. So they need to listen and do what you tell them to do. If you tell them to stand when they answer, they need to stand when they answer. If you're playing some type of an action game where they need to line up or go to the board or whatever, they need to learn to pay attention. So think of it this way. You speak, they listen. Okay? Sometimes it seems as if students don't even hear what you say. So you've got to get on top of that. When you speak, they listen. And actually, that's kind of their parents' job as well. And if students' parents have done that, it'll be easier for you in the classroom. But at the same time, they have to learn to, when authority is speaking, whether it's mom, dad, teacher, eventually God, when authority is speaking, they listen. And I don't mean listening here, I'm actually meaning paying attention. Some students are not there, seems like they're not even there mentally. Their body's in the classroom and it's like they weren't even there. They did not listen to what you said. So make sure that with getting them to pay attention, 2 ideas here. Establish the habit that when you speak, they listen, okay? And then the second thing, as the teacher, make sure you have their attention. You can tell if the student is totally in outer space, they're not there. Pay attention to where their eyes are, okay? And pay attention to where their hands are. If their hands are somewhere doing something, they are not listening. If their eyes are somewhere else, they are not listening. So as the teacher, always get the student's attention. That's why often maybe you'll hear primary teachers have them put their pencils down, fold their hands, close their book or whatever when you're giving instructions. Okay, so you have to get their attention. You tell them, put your pencils down, close your book, fold your hands, look up here, or whatever you need to do. So our third goal is to establish good habits. Good habits in general that apply to other subjects and even other areas of their lives. Neatness, completeness, following directions, responsibility, and paying attention. Now let's talk a little more specifically about establishing good math habits. So we're primary, we are laying the foundation academically, but we're also laying the foundation for their school habits and their school, I guess we'd say the responsibility that they take in the classroom. So establishing good math habits. We're going to go back. Neatness. Let's apply that. Neatness. How can we apply neatness specifically to math? Yes?
Lining up the columns when you're subtracting or adding.
Exactly. That's my number 3, but we can put it first. Straight columns. You have to teach them to set up their problems. You have to teach them to do proper number formation. Consistency of number size. Because if they have their numbers all over the place, and if they're all different sizes, it's going to be very difficult to line up their columns. So proper number formation, consistent number size, straight column, and here's a 4th one, using the lines on the paper. I have trouble with 7th graders using the lines on their paper. They want to write all over the place, okay? Just because we're not writing in cursive and it's not a subject where we're writing doesn't mean we put things all over the page. Using the lines on the paper. So neatness in math, forming their numbers correctly, consistency of number size, straight columns when we're doing any math problem, setting things up neatly. Whether we're doing division or addition, subtraction, whatever. Using the lines on the paper is another one. And then just general readability. Many times they can't read their own number because it's so sloppy. So the opposite of sloppiness, whether it's the numbers being formed correctly so they can be distinguished, the consistency of their size, lining up the columns and setting up problems correctly, using the lines on the paper, and then in general, neatness and readability, the opposite of sloppiness. So neatness in the actual doing of their math problems. We should establish neatness habits in general. You know, we're talking there about writing their name and taking care of their things, but also then specifically neatness on math pages. Neatness on math pages is the most important as far as other subjects are concerned. Because what do you have to do? You have to be able to read your numbers so that you can solve your problem. And if your numbers are misaligned, you're going to miss the problem. If you're sloppy in English, it's pretty much for the teacher's problem, right? Because you can't read it. But in math, you have to be constantly reading your own handwriting and reading your own numbers. So neatness is very important in math. And what are we going to do in first grade? We're going to establish the habit of neatness. How do you do this? Keep giving it back to them. Do it over, do it over. If you take it and grade it and go on, what happens? It won't be corrected and it gets worse. So establishing good habits. Neatness, completeness. Completeness. You should never accept incomplete work. Okay, sometimes I suppose it can be overwhelming if a student has a lot of incomplete work, but you got to nip it in the bud. You're the first grade teacher, you're the second grade teacher, and even you have to do this at the beginning of every year for every grade. Not just, but think of it as primary. You're starting from scratch, and so you are establishing it from the first. But every teacher at the beginning of the year needs to do these same things, establishing good habits. And you know the saying, inspect what you expect, enforce what you want done, and if you don't, if you accept sloppiness, if you accept things that are not complete, you're going to get more and more and more. The problem get worse and worse. So never accept incomplete work. Mark it wrong, give it back, make them do it. You don't want your students to have the idea that they can get out of work by getting a bad grade. Though that's true in some sense, they do get out of work by getting a bad grade, but you want to try to nip that in the bud as well. So neatness, completeness, and then we said following directions. In math, we do this by teaching them how to do multi-step problems. We'll help them learn to follow directions. This is procedure. And so it takes practice, and we want to establish the habit of being able to do, we're following directions in the sense of we're able to do a two-step story problem, or we're able to do a math computation that requires more than one operation. Multi-step, okay? Now, we can't expect them to multitask, do more than one at a time, but we want to teach them to be able to follow directions in sequence. Multi-step procedures. That's a goal. Work on them being able to do a two-step story problem. Work on them being able to first do this, then do this in the math computation. Then responsibility in math class. How do we, to apply this to math class in particular, the first thing I want to talk about with responsibility is the idea of class participation. When you're doing drill in particular, or if you're playing a math game, or if you're teaching, we want to strive for maximum class participation. So let's talk about drill for a second. If you're doing drill, you have to be creative of how you can get all students, or at least as many as possible, involved. Otherwise, your slower students who actually need the drill the most, what are they going to do? They're going to sit back and listen for the smarter students or the faster students to start with the answer. And what do? They chime in. And this is obvious. It happens constantly because the smarter student, all the students know who to listen to, and they know who's the fastest in drill, and so they will listen. And when that person makes a mistake, what happens? Almost the entire class follows, right? So responsibility, we're talking about class participation, particularly during drill. Be creative. Be creative in different ways to get maximum participation. And to do this, you will have to do some individualized drilling and random drilling. So their drill, yes, you're going to be drilling as a class, and there's always going to be the laggers who are listening for the faster students, but try to individualize drill as much as possible, and then try to randomize drill as much as possible. So even if I'm going around the room, I want to mix it up. Why? Because I'm going down the row here, and Brooke is not going to pay attention until she knows I'm on the third flashcard, and that's her flashcard, right? Been there, done that, if you've been in a classroom. If you can remember when you're in the classroom, think about what students are going to naturally do. They're going to naturally listen and chime in, because sometimes I think for some students, thinking is painful. Okay, and so they're going to just sit and chime in, and they're going to sit back and do as little as possible. That's human nature, so you can't allow that. And you have to be creative. Otherwise, the person who needs the drill the most is what? Going to get the least benefit out of it. So, class participation during drill. Be creative. Individualize it as much as possible. Randomize it as much as possible so the students have to pay attention to drill and not just sit back and listen to other students, not sit back and figure out when it's going to be their turn. Okay, so randomize it and individualize it as much as possible. You're still going to be doing things as a class. And even as you do things as a class, pay attention to who is speaking and who's not. Pay attention to who's doing all the thinking and who's sitting back and maybe not even participating. They may just be standing there. Or they may just be trying to lip sync. Okay? So pay attention. If you're doing a drill and the top student is completely leading the way and no one's getting any benefit, have so-and-so sit down. Say, okay, class, we are not, let's go ahead and sit down and let's do it without him, without her. Okay, so drill, responsibility, I'm talking in math class, begins with class participation. First of all, class participation during drill time. Then class participation during teaching time. Of course, I'm used to teaching high schoolers, and I require them to be working on the problem kind of in their own notes, writing it down, following with me. But do first graders write things down and follow with the teacher? No, so you have to be conscious of class participation while you are actually yourself doing problems on the board, while you yourself are actually teaching how to do the problem. And how do you accomplish this? Well, the first thing is to be aware. Especially as a new teacher, you have to be aware of if the class is paying attention. And the other way that you want to be aware and you want to ask questions. So we're talking about responsibility during math class. We're talking about establishing good habits. And the first way we hold them responsible is in class participation. Drill time, and then teaching time. During your lesson, be aware of who's paying attention and who's not, and then ask questions. And then the third idea here is don't do all the talking. We said at the beginning of last semester that teaching is confirming for joint possession, and that includes first grade. So as I'm teaching a procedure, I do teach the procedure, show them the steps, repeat the steps, have them say the steps, ask a student, what's next? What do I do next? What do I do next? And let's say I'm teaching long column addition, or I'm just doing an addition problem. Should I be doing all the adding? So the idea here is don't do all the talking, don't do all the math. All right, even in 7th grade and in high school, I'll say something like this. Okay, you've watched me do it. it's your turn. Okay, they can watch you do problems all day. Are they going to learn how to do the problems if all they're doing is watching you? So, drill time, class time, and then last thing with class participation is board work or seat work time. Board work and seat work. Okay, first grade, you can't have one student at the board and everybody else copy the problem and do the work. It doesn't happen. So what do you have to do? You have to use the blackboard very creatively. Even in second grade, another one of my fiascos in second grade math was I didn't realize that they couldn't keep up with me as far as copying the problem and working it together. I didn't realize then if I wanted them to copy a problem off the board, what did I have to do? Stop, walk around, make sure everybody had it copied, make sure they lined up their columns. They just weren't used to working problems at their seats. And I think you can work towards doing more and more of that, but you got to realize that they are not able to keep up with you like you were taught math when you were in upper grade school or like you were taught math in high school. So you have to be creative during board work and seat work time. So board work, be creative. Try to have multiple students at the blackboard. Try to have multiple students at the blackboard and even multiple things going on. You have to keep it moving, quickly moving from problem to problem to problem, because they're not writing it down. They're just watching and listening. So we have to get class participation. All right, maybe we're teaching clocks. Okay, and then we should have multiple clocks, and we can say, okay, so-and-so, go up to the board and set the first clock at 5:30. So-and-so, you go up to the board and set the next clock at such and such. And then you have your own clock and you say, okay, so-and-so, what time is it? See, so that we can get as many people actually doing and answering questions at a time as possible. You have to be creative and you have to be prepared and you have to have multiple problems ready up on the board, ready to go. Otherwise, there's going to be too much what we could call downtime. We don't want downtime during our math class where there's stretches of time where people are doing nothing. All right, so if I'm teaching subtraction and I have a second grader up at the board, we've already taught it, we're practicing subtraction now. I have a second grader up at the board doing a problem. Okay, she's up here at the board, she's showing me she can borrow, I'm standing here watching her. What's the rest of the class doing? Not much. Some of them absolutely nothing. They might be watching her. How many of them are actually watching her and seeing her what she's doing? Not that many. Okay, and that's when you have students misbehaving and there's not a lot of learning going on. Who's the only one learning? The person actually doing the problem. So we want to try to keep all of our students busy. We want to keep all of our students, let's use the word engaged. Whether it's drill time, whether it's lesson time, or board work, seat work, which we could call that practice time. Okay, let's call it that. Drill time, lesson time, practice time. The goal is to engage as much of the class as possible. So we're talking about responsibility. We're talking about keeping the students accountable. We're talking about engaging all of the students. So responsibility in class is done through class participation. And the goal is to do what? Engage as many of the students as you can all the time. No downtime, no gaps of time where nothing's going on. Okay, so are there going to be times where you're working with an individual? Absolutely, but try to limit those times and try to have someone, at least have another couple other people working the problem at the same time. Okay, some of those classrooms have double blackboard. Use the double blackboard. Okay, instead of having one subtraction problem on the board, have that same subtraction problem 3 times and have different stations. Maybe you could be creative, have different stations, okay, and have 3 people up doing the subtraction problem at the same time. That's better than 1, isn't it? And if you have blackboard space, you want class participation. Hopefully, you could watch more than 1 student at a time and see if they're borrowing. So use the blackboard. One thing when I grade student teachers, or when I'm grading you when you're doing your lesson, I'm constantly writing on my evaluation sheet, use the blackboard effectively. Okay, so this is a problem with new teachers and inexperienced teachers, is the class participation is at a low level. Is that good for first and second? No. And the reason that it's at a low level more at first and second than it is in third and fourth is simply because the students can't do as much on their own. And of course, by high school and by junior high, I'm making them all do all the problems, and we're supposedly, well, at least they're pretending to. Okay? So that way we're all working through the problem together. That's much more difficult with first and second grade. So responsibility begins with class participation, and then responsibility continues to homework. All right, we want to use our homework effectively. What should homework do? We want to use it effectively, and the only way that we're going to do it is if the homework is a good reflection of the day's lesson. The homework needs to be a good reflection of the day's lesson, and the homework needs to include review. Homework is for practice. Homework is for individual practice, but it has to be balanced. The homework has to be a good reflection of the day's lesson. You can't give them things you haven't taught them, especially at primary level. Now maybe later on in upper levels, there are some things that they need to be able to figure out on their own. There's a balance, but remember, we're at the other end of the spectrum. And so we want to make sure that our homework is a adequate reflection of the day's lesson. We want for them to practice what we taught them, not try to figure something out on their own. And the homework needs to have review practice as well. Math is a building topic. All right, so we want to give them a good homework assignment. It needs to be an adequate reflection of the lesson. It needs to have review practice, but then the balancing point with that is then we need to give them good homework that they're well able to do, and then require it to be complete and neat and on time. That's responsibility. Complete and neat and on time. All right, so you establish procedure. You have a time where you have the homework clearly written on the blackboard. Teachers do all kinds of different procedures. You might have a sheet already prepared for them with the homework all spelled out to send home to the parents, because you will need the parents' cooperation on the homework. You will. They're first graders. So you want to hold them responsible, but the third idea is you have to communicate. Okay, you have to communicate. You have to have procedure. So you want homework that is a good reflection of the day's lesson, has the adequate review practice, something that they can do. You got to make sure you cover it's something they can do, but then you hold them responsible for it. It has to be neat, complete, and on time. And then the third idea is adequate instruction, communication, and procedure. You have to have it set up a way to communicate that with the parents. You have to have it set up so the students know what they're supposed to do. They're first graders. You can't expect them to be like you are, okay? That they are organized, they know what they have to do. They're not responsible, but we have to start working on their responsibility. So maybe you have the homework on the board when they come in, and you have a specific time where they sit there and they are to copy their homework. But that doesn't happen in September in first grade, does it? You have to establish those habits. And it takes time and patience. Or maybe you have a different way to communicate with your parents. Maybe you have a homework sheet that you send home with the parents that has what the students have to do, because the students will need help with their responsibility. They're first graders, okay? So you have to have a communication with their parents, and you have to have a procedure so that you're not expecting them to do something that they can't do, okay? So you want to make sure they can do it. You understand what I'm saying here? Make sure it's adequate, make sure they can do it, they're well able to do it. Make sure they know what they're supposed to do, communicate with their parents. But then you do have to hold them accountable. But make sure that you're being reasonable. And you start simple and you train them throughout the year so that by the time you're at Christmas, it's not an issue anymore. You're running like a well-oiled machine. Otherwise, it's going to be frustrating for the parents, frustrating for you because you're not getting your papers, frustrating for the students because they don't understand or know what you want them to do. They need to know what you expect so that they can do it, and then you need to enforce that. Okay, so we're establishing good habits, okay? We talked about neatness, completeness, being able to do multi-steps when they follow directions, holding them responsible, okay? And so what you have to teach them to do with primary is a lot of these things, kind of from scratch. All right, I was surprised at how difficult it was for second graders to do a multi-step problem without prompting. All right, so we want to be working towards things like that, so that they can start doing multi-step problems. All right, so we're establishing good habits. We want to help our first graders, our second graders become good students in other subject areas, but then also in particular in math. Math sometimes takes more character, okay, than other classes do. For me, it was spelling. Hated spelling. Okay, math was easy. But whatever the subject is, we want to, as the primary teacher, establish good habits. These will translate to other areas of their life. We want to help them be a good student, and we're going to use math class to do it. Okay? So, what are we doing in our primary math class? We are pouring a solid foundation. We're establishing a solid foundation in arithmetic. What else are we doing? Paving the way to expand our arithmetic skills. And what else are we doing? We're establishing good habits. We want our students to be good students. We want our students to be successful in math. They're not neat. They're not completing their work. They can't do a multi-step problem. They can't follow directions. They're irresponsible. It's going to really show up in which class? Math class. Okay? It doesn't show up so much in reading and other subjects in science, though, of course, if they're extremely sloppy and irresponsible, they're going to be a poor student in all areas. But we can use our math class. All right, so fourth goal for primary math. The fourth goal for primary math is to develop an appreciation for learning at a young age. Okay, if you are an exciting, fun teacher, especially in math class, and you use math class efficiently, they are going to love math, right? At least until they get me in 7th grade. Okay? You want them to like math. And you're the first grade teacher, you can help students appreciate learning. Now, I'm not all about what public education and secular teaching methodology has coined a word called edutainment. What is that? Making learning fun. But that's not the goal is having fun, but at the same time, let's be in balance. We can make math class fun. So let's try to have some fun in our class, and that will help develop an appreciation for learning. So first point, make math class fun, not drudgery. Math should be fun, not a drudgery. Okay, I see some of you smirking. Okay, but we're in first grade, we're in second grade. We have drill time that can be fun. Okay, there's a balance to this. Don't let it get out of hand, right? We have competition that we can use in math class. We can compete with our addition families and our subtraction families. We can race with our addition families and our subtraction families. We can beat the boys with our addition family and our subtraction family. All right, so we're developing appreciation for learning. We want to make math fun. Math has a bad reputation. I hate math. I don't like math. That's code for I don't have any character. No, not really. But if you start out in first grade with math being their favorite class because they get to go to the board, they get to race, they get to go up to the board and play a game and race somebody else doing a math problem. All right, so make it fun. All right, so underneath that, be active but in control. Math class should be active but in control. Control, not chaos. All right, so be active. Next, use competition. So we want to be active but under control. We will use competition. All right, balance. No poor sportsmanship allowed. We'll talk about this a little later with drill. We'll be talking about drill after spring break. But you can't allow students to get mad when someone on their team messes up and they lose. All right, so you have to watch the poor sportsmanship with competition, just like you have to watch classroom control when you're playing games and you're being active. So, math class, let's make it fun. We're trying to develop an appreciation for learning. That's our fourth goal as our primary teacher, and we're going to make math class fun. We're going to keep it active but in control. We're going to use competition but watch out for poor sportsmanship. Okay, but we are going to maintain learning. If we're playing a game, we are using it to memorize math facts. If we're playing a game, we're using it to practice our carrying. If we're playing a game, we're using it to be able to do math in our head mentally. First one, be able to show them the flashcard. 10 plus 2, and then make them subtract 3. Start on multiple combinations. So we're having fun, we have to learn. Whether it's to memorize the math facts, whether it's to practice a math skill or procedure, or whether it's to sharpen their minds mentally. We can do this and make it fun, okay? And so you have to be creative with your drill time and your class time. And you want to, we talked about class participation. The other thing that you want to do if you use competition, try to be as fair as you can. If you're going to have teams, split the teams equally. If you're going to pair two students at the blackboard for competition in a race, have them as close as you can to ability. All right, you're going to know who's fast and who's slow. You're going to know who's struggling and who's not. You're going to know who's sharpened their mind and has those mental math, has their mental math down, and who doesn't. So you want to pair them. You want to keep it fun and keep it fair as much as you can. It's no fun if you play games by row and you know you're going to lose because so-and-so's in your row, okay? Going back to my sometimes poor sportsmanship. Okay, so you got to watch that. But do you understand what we're doing? We're in first grade. We want our students to love school. I loved school, okay? I wanted to go to school. I liked being in class. I liked being with my friends. I liked playing games at the board. I liked going to the blackboard, okay? It was fun. So we want to keep that. Obviously, it's balanced. All right, so we're developing an appreciation for learning. We're keeping math class fun. All right, we are going to we're going to keep it active but under control. We're going to use competition but keep good sportsmanship. And then we're going to be actually learning. We're not just racing. We want to make sure that we're memorizing math skills, memorizing math facts, practicing math skills, okay? Or sharpening their minds by that mental math, getting them to do the computation without seeing it. And we can do that in math class and we can make it fun. We don't want it to be drudgery, okay? Or anything. As the primary teacher, you can really work at making your class fun, especially math. You can't have fun and a good time all the time. I don't mean that. But especially when you're the primary teacher, you want your students to love coming to class. You want your students to like you even a little bit more, and they should. If you're doing your job, your students are going to like you, and they're going to want to please you. So we're starting in first grade. We want to develop an appreciation for learning. First of all, we do want to have a little bit of fun in math class. We want to be the opposite. Math should not be a drudgery. So avoid drudgery, make it a little bit fun. It's not college, okay? A second idea, we're trying to develop an appreciation for learning from day one in first grade. We want to use it, secondly, to build confidence. We want to use math class to build confidence. All right, in Fairhaven Christian Academy, we have demerits, right? But we need demerits, of course we do. But at the same time, we should not need them all the time, every day. That's all we do. So we're going to try to instill confidence, first of all, with positive motivation. Competition, prizes, praise from the teacher. So let's think about positive motivation. We want them to develop an appreciation for learning. We don't want learning to be a drudgery. And you know, and I know that it can be. And if it's a drudgery for you or me as teacher, what is it for the student? So we want to avoid the drudgery, and we want to use math class to develop confidence. Underneath that, we're using positive motivation. Then we are using encouragement. You can do it. I will help you. You should be saying that all the time. You can do it. I'll help you. Here, you can do that. Let me show you. All right? Encouragement. And I mean, here we're talking on a personal level. You can do that. I'm going to help you with that. Oh, we're going to learn that. Don't worry. We're going to learn that. Oh, let me show you how to do that. Constantly positive motivation, but also, let me use the word individual. Individual encouragement. You can do that. I will help you. A third idea is you're going to continually be showing them how easy math is. Let's buck the trend. Instead of having the idea, instead of fostering, let's say it this way, instead of fostering the idea that math is hard, we want to start we want to brainwash them. Can you guys brainwash the first graders a little bit and the second graders a little bit? Math is fun, math is easy. And if you're on your toes and you're doing a good job, you're going to be able to portray that. This is easy. Math is easy. I don't know about you, but I really dislike English grammar. I really dislike punctuation rules. Okay, it's kind of fun sometimes to be able to write a good composition, and it takes work, and that has a really important goal, and it's a very important skill to have writing skills. But comma rules, punctuation, to me, math is much easier than English grammar. Okay, it's much easier than spelling, especially English, because there's so many exceptions and blends and whatnot. Okay, math is easy. Math doesn't change. I really think math is the easiest subject to teach. Okay, it's not like science. Of course, I'm a math science teacher. Math science, I have to continuously update, go back and look. I just read something about genetics, where they're more and more thinking that some of the Mendelian crossing is oversimplified, especially in high school math or high school science books. So I'm going to have to look at that and say, oh no, I'm not teaching high school biology now, but I used to teach that, and it's incorrect. Okay, even though it was in all the textbooks and everybody taught it. Particularly the idea of in high school biology, they're always doing little genetic experiments. A lot of those are completely erroneous. The one with rolling your tongue, and the one with the attached lobes and unattached lobes, those are not best, because what they're finding out now is DNA and genetics is so much more complex than we know. So, do I have that problem with math? Do I have to remember things in math? Once I have those math facts drilled in me, math is not a matter of understanding. We've said this over and over again. In math, what is success? Success is understanding, right? And so math is easy. We're going to be trying to instill confidence. We don't want to give the impression that math is hard. We don't want to give the impression that math is tricky. Math is not a series of tricks they have to memorize. It's not. It makes perfect sense. It's not the comma rules. Okay? It's not phonics. It's not spelling. It's not something that we have to try to remember. If we get their understanding starting first grade, we are going to build confidence. All right? So we're going to try, our last goal is to develop an appreciation for learning. We want to avoid drudgery. We want to make our math class fun. Don't tell anybody I said that, right? All right. But then we're going to use math class to instill confidence. And the last thing, as far as developing an appreciation for learning, is that we are going to use math class to make our students curious and wanting to learn more. Science class is very good for this. Much better than math, but I'm going to stick it here anyways. Okay? So we want them to become curious. We're going to use math class to make our students curious and wanting to learn more. We want them to want the game to keep going. We want them to want to be able to do things in their head. We want them to almost, I'll say almost, we want them to almost enjoy math class, and we want them to be looking forward to the next thing that we're going to learn. Okay, today we learned this. Tomorrow we're going to learn this. This is especially useful with teaching them things for later. Okay? Remember I told you yesterday that when we were talking about expansion, even second graders do equations, kind of. Remember I showed you that? That even first graders will be taught what number. I don't remember what I had on the board. I think I had this. So I'm in first grade math. I want them to be curious about algebra, and this is called an equation. See where I'm going with this? I want them to want to learn what's next. I want to stay away from drudgery and have fun in math class. I want to instill confidence, but I also want to develop curiosity, want them to learn more. And you know what we'll do here is we say, oh, when you get to algebra, we're going to put a letter here instead, and we're going to solve for X. I'm trying to get some curiosity. A few years ago, Mrs. Leslie, who was the second grade math teacher, she had to go out of town for a funeral, and then I had to miss another time, so we switched places. Okay, you should have, you know, I come in as the algebra teacher and I come into second grade math and we have fun. And I taught a lesson like this, what number? I wasn't there, of course, but I would be really curious to have seen the ninth graders' faces when Mrs. Leslie came to sub for me. Kind of the reverse psychology going on there. All right, so do you understand, as the primary teacher, the last 2 lectures we were talking more math and more academically, but primary level is exciting, should be exciting for you in all subjects. You get to establish good habits. You get to train your students to be good students for years down the road, and you get to develop your students an appreciation for learning. Okay, so I've taught from second grade through, as far as math goes, I've taught second grade math through advanced algebra in college. Which students are the most fun to teach? The little ones. Okay, sometimes the college students can be, you know, blank-faced and good luck keeping me awake today. So you have an opportunity as the primary teacher, right? Not only are you laying a solid foundation for their math skills, not only are you paving the way for math down the road, you also have young lives. They're a lot more excited, they're a lot easier to excite them, a lot easier to have fun with them than any other age. So if you're going to be a primary teacher, you want to take advantage. So that's why I wanted you to have those kind of goals in your mind. Maybe goals wasn't a good way to put it, maybe an approach. This should be your approach to teaching primary math. You got to understand the importance of it because yes, you are establishing their academic foundation. Yes, you're getting them ready for the next year, but you also have a unique opportunity to mold their future, mold them as future students. So, what are our 4 goals or 4 ways to approach primary math? We're going to lay a solid foundation. All by the time they are done with 3rd grade. Kind of by the end of 3rd grade, we are done. We are going to pave the way to expand their arithmetic skills. We're going to prepare them for their future grades, but also we can help develop them into a good person and a good student. And we can develop in them a love of learning, appreciation for learning. If we've done our job, we can produce some really good students. And I think that math class is one of the easier ways to directly do that. All right, because it does. Math can be drudgery. Math can take a lot of time. Math does require character. Math requires neatness and a little bit of being meticulous. Students who are meticulous do very well in upper mathematics. Why? They can take care of details. They can do multi-step problems. What are we doing? We're helping prepare them for their life in the future. We're doing radicals in Algebra 1. A lot of detail. I have several students who are very intelligent and they're pulling a C. Why? They can't take care of the details. They keep forgetting to root this, or they put the exponent in the wrong place, or they can't read their number. Or when they simplify the radical, they forget to square root it as they bring it out. Little tiny details. And we can establish that and head some of those problems off in the future.